Good morning, everyone. My name is Scott Chesler. I'm one of the regional managers for Wearable Data in Pittsburgh. We're honored to be one of the co-main sponsors of this event today, and also honored to be able to introduce Jonny from Jawbone as one of the keynote speakers. Before I introduce Jonny, I just wanted to give a couple of reasons why we decided to be one of the co-main sponsors today. One is we have a big data practice, so is there a little bit of selfishness in that? Absolutely, completely guilty, Your Honor. Our big data practice has doubled over the past year, and we just added 3 or 4 people within the last month. So I'm sure, as all of you know, big data is becoming more prevalent in the IT space, and obviously we're seeing that. So if anybody has any questions about what big data can do for them, want to develop a strategy, please look anybody up from Wearable Data. We'll be around all day today. I'm also on Networking, so you can get my contact information from there as well. Then the second reason is the ability to educate people. Who better to partner with than the Pittsburgh Technology Council? The Tech Council does a fabulous job of providing information to all their members so all of you can make informed decisions to drive your business. And a couple examples of that are actually this event last year. One of the Tech Talk breakouts, Industrial Scientific gave a presentation, and as the greedy capitalist sales guy, you would think of, hey, how can I talk to my customers about big data that can help their profitability, their business, and we can actually sell them something as well. What Industrial Scientific did was they used big data to determine how to increase safety in their plants, and they used one very specific example of they had a very big problem area in the plant. They were able to determine why they were having these constant safety issues, and they were able to correct those issues and increase the safety of the workers. And the second is, we think about big data, and you think all the big companies of the world, yeah, those folks use big data. But we don't think about the smaller companies that use big data. We were here last year, and we sponsored one of the speaker series, and there were 3 panelists last year. One was GE, and as David Chappell from EMC talked about today, we would all know that they would use big data. You would think about those big companies using that. But there was also another panelist from Ritter Engineering, and they sell hoses and valves. They're a $70 million company. They determined with the use of big data, A, we want to get rid of one of our hose suppliers because they weren't very reliable and we were having customer satisfaction issues. And secondly, they were able to develop their support contracts based on predictive analytics. So they were able to predictively predict their revenue and profit, and that's extremely important for a $70 million company. So for us, that really opened our eyes to say that even the very small companies that we wouldn't even think to introduce big data to, those folks are using it as well and using it pretty creatively. So, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce Jonny. So, Jonny Farringdon from Jawbone. In his past, he was a senior research fellow at the University College London in computer science from 95 to 97, and cognitive psychology from 1995. I'm not even sure what that is. He led multiple discipline wearables team fusing textiles, fashion, and electronics at Philips with its user-centered design ethos, resulting in the Philips Levi's ICD Plus clothing range. He did that from 97 to 2001. He was also director of informatics at Body Media, where he designed wearable medical sensors and algorithms. He did that from 2001 to 2013, and those folks were then acquired by Jawbone. He's currently director of informatics at Jawbone. He creates human-centered sensor and data technologies for wearable devices and the Internet of Things. He's been doing that since 2013. He also holds several patents, authored numerous articles and papers on machine learning, cognition, and wearable computing. Without further ado, Jonny Farringdon from Jawbone.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. I think we're good. I need my clicker. So I'm Jonny. Thanks. Nice to see you this morning. Come and talk to me. I'm here with a colleague, Maura. So if you can't find me, find Maura if you have questions about the kinds of things we're gonna talk about. Let's see if my clicker works. Yay. Very quickly to establish, I guess I spent 13 years at Body Media, which was a medical device company, so regulated by the FDA. regulated in Europe under sort of ISO regulations. Dealing with human data and making a wearable in Pittsburgh, really kind of creating the market for the modern wearable you see. Bought by Jawbone a couple of years ago. Jawbone is more of a wellness company, not a medical device company, but global and trying to make beautiful devices, not afraid of color. Wearables really let you rethink what your data is about people. And so I'm going to try and talk about that. I think there's only 5 important things. From my point of view, it's a very personal story, which kind of is going to be based on medical and human and wearable data, but I'll try and transfer it to lots of other domains. So you see, I think these lessons do transfer to lots of other people who are trying to work in big data. But I only think there's 5 important things. That's data quality, performance specification if you're in a regulated industry, the informatics, that's the real nuts and bolts of what you do with all this data, how are you going to analyze it, what are you going to look at. And then the broadening, what's happening with the Internet of Things and context and getting a bit broader than what's going to happen next. And actually the 5th thing isn't even important. So my domain's complicated. I'm sure your domain is complicated. The complication of my domain is that it moves. And it's flexible and bendy, and people don't understand it. And so data quality, even before we get any data, we spent a lot of time and effort understanding where the heck are we going to where are we going to collect data from? How are we going to collect data? So before we get there, before we get to the big data bit and use it, I want to go for quality. I really want to understand what I'm doing. So we spend a lot of time researching and understanding and being the only people maybe that really care about wearable data in such detail. So we understood what kinds of sensors would you wear where, and why would you do that? So what could you build that you could wear that would collect the data that you want? Or you could rush straight to the wrist. And there's a good reason for that, in that there's very high acceptance for that. So you could put sensors in places that people will accept them, or maybe there's some convergence of you want to put sensors you want to collect data from the right place, but you also want to collect it in a way that is very acceptable to people. Not everything here's at the wrist, but quick survey: how many people are wearing a activity monitor right now? That's nice. And how many people plan to get one for Christmas? There we go. So that gives good half the room. We can give you some tips on which ones we like. What I noticed with a lot of these devices, it's a consumer electronics market. It's an unregulated market in terms of performance. And so the performance claims, to me, seem a little crazy. The first one, all the trackers should be 95% accurate. Well, they should be, but are they, is my question. No one would tell you what they do, just what they should do. It doesn't make any sense to me. The more you wear it, the more accurate it'll be. Well, that's great. But when you buy it, does that mean it's not accurate? And how much is more? Is it a year? Is it a month? If I wear it forever, does it become perfect? I don't know, because they don't tell you. The one on the bottom left, sleep's complicated. We'll talk a lot about sleep data, because sleep, we all do it. It's a third of our lives. It's very important to our overall health. And sleep is really hard to do, even for professional medical equipment. So lots of people talk about correlations. I don't go into the statistics. 0.92, fantastic. But you only ever talk about that because your error is horrible. So correlations only ever come up on their own when you don't have a good performance, really. So you have to find something that is good and talk about that. So again, I'm very disappointed with all these things, the way people describe their products. And maybe you don't care for your big data, it's not relevant, but sometimes it's very relevant. And before you've even built the data, thinking about what are you aiming for out of your data? What are you going to tell people about what you can do and how reliably you can do it? To me, is very important. I want quality. But there was a statement in Moby Health News. Lots of devices said that it's engagement that's important, not accuracy. And to some degree, that's true. If you keep a food diary, if you keep a little paper booklet and write down what you eat, you begin to lose weight. There's nothing to do with accuracy there. It's just you've got yourself engaged, and because you've become engaged in the notion of monitoring yourself, you become more aware of yourself, and then you change your behavior. But it can't be completely true. You do need accuracy. I'm going to take an example from a completely different domain. I hope some of you work in regulated industries. I mean, there's the Ubers and the medical and that is that at least in regulatory requirements are connected to the physical reality of your device and the human condition, the way I see it. But it doesn't seem to match a customer's expectations. And so as an example from the car industry, you buy a car, and you think the speedometer is going to tell you how fast you're going. In fact, pretty much, I'm sure everybody assumes that their speedo tells them the speed of their car. And the US's approach is very physical reality. They understand the physics of the instrument, so they know that it can be plus or minus 2%, but if you're going fast, it can be 4%. But if it's hot or cold, it can be another 2%. And if your car has ever got really cold, it can be off another 2%. And so what it really means is you're driving at 70, a true 70, but your speedo can read anything 67 to 76. So nice engineering point of view, how accurate is this monitor? How accurate is your data going to be? In Europe, much more touchy-feely, carey, nanny states. So it's much more about the human condition. So in Europe, the speedos are never allowed to tell you a number lower than your true speed. They don't want you to speed, basically. They want you to break the law. So if you're going at true 70, it can tell you 79, but it can never tell you 69. So if you have a European car, your speedo almost always is certainly biased in the European regs and is a little bit reading higher than you're going. If you buy an American car, it's doing something different. Don't know what the Japanese do. Completely different industry, but this notion of the owner, the user of the data is expecting just the data to be right. Everyone expects the data to be right. Everyone with a fitness tracker, I've walked 8,000 steps today and I've burnt 1,200 calories. But no, life is not this nice, clean precision. It's lots of normal distributions and fuzziness and plus and minuses. But if you're in an industry that has to be honest about it, which is the medical industry, I'm not picking on Zephyr. I think Zephyr's a great example. So they make a chest strap heart rate monitor. And lots of people will have a heart rate monitor. And you assume your heart rate monitor just tells you what your heart rate is. But Zephyr's really honest. If you're running fast, it's this bad. But if you're running slowly, it's this. And the worst we've ever seen is 12 beats off. So because it's regulated, they have to tell you that. But if you just go to go to Dick's Sporting Goods and buy a chest strap that isn't a medical device too, it's not going to tell you, and everyone just assumes data's right. The moral being a mix of don't assume your data's right, because we never do. I mean, we're making devices all the time, and Maura and I, perhaps the people who care most of, everyone just assumes, well, it's got a MEMS accelerometer in it from the MEMS consortium, so it's got to be right. But we built our own test jigs. Well, how right is right? What does it really mean? Gold standard data to us is also, lost a bit of the edge, is the beginning of our sort of the big data bit of the story, because you go to a sleep lab and you've got at least 5 leads of EKG at 128 hertz or something, and you've got EEG running at 500 hertz, and you've got this for 6 hours. You've got a massive amount of data. You've got a human doing the scoring. So it's not a machine telling you how you're sleeping and if you're in REM sleep. There's a human staying up all night watching these dials and machines and scoring your sleep, which is why it costs $1,000 a night to collect a sleep lab piece of data. The portable VO2 machine might cost $20,000, going to give you the calorie burn every breath you exhale. So and then a lot of other telemetry. So you can collect a lot of data very fast in volume, but not in people, because it's very expensive to push a lot of people through these things. But for us, quality comes before quantity. I met a guy who made a different wristband, a very popular brand, and we were talking about sleep, and I was talking about the sleep labs I was using. He said, oh, we went to Best Buy and we bought these sort of off-the-shelf consumer sleep gizmos that you put on your head, and everyone at the office wore one, and that's how we built our sleep detector. Okay, I mean, that's fine, because they don't have to stand behind what they do. They don't have to say, our data is this accurate, and when we tell you this is how true it is and how often. Whereas when I build something, I feel I have to stand behind it, and because the FDA, a federal agency that carry guns and can arrest you, I have to. I'm obliged to do that, but even if I wasn't obliged to do it, that's what I want to do with my data and any predictions that I make. Something that's important for us, and the reason our data gets bigger, faster, the go-to sensor for everyone in our industry is a MEMS sensor, yay, and invaluable, but it doesn't tell you everything. So here's an example of, if we added steps, you'd see, sitting still, walking. You can't tell the difference between walking on a flat surface and walking upstairs. But in terms of your health, it's really important to understand what kind of exercise you're getting. So what we like to do is add more and more and more sensors, orthogonal sensors that collect completely different kinds of data. So our database is suddenly going to grow in lots of different directions at once. Because now we add heat flux, so how much heat is leaving the body. The muscles are only about 30% efficient. So when you walk around, they generate lots of heat. But when you walk upstairs, they generate tons of heat. So now we can distinguish, we know you're walking, that's great. But now we can distinguish, are you walking uphill or are you walking downhill? And then we can connect that back to national guidelines for healthy living about how much exercise you're getting at what different intensity level. So our data set grows. I just had to put this in because I think it's interesting. Hope you do. We have a couple of devices on the International Space Station. We've got that market sewn up. And this is like a 24-hour. Top is midnight, bottom is midday, back to midnight again through the week. And the astronauts are wearing these they wear them for about a week every 3 weeks or something. And they're going to do that. They've been doing that for the last 3 years, and they're going to be doing that for another few years. And the team came to us and said, well, officially there's a diary, almost like 10-minute resolution of what the astronauts do all day, all night. But they just don't keep the diary. And we need to know when they're exercising, because exercise is really important because of muscle atrophy and all sorts of things. So they said, well, we've got this data. We can't use a pedometer, or even it's really hard to use motion because there's no gravity, so there's no step. You can't count steps on the space station because nobody walks. You push off with your finger and you fly to the other end of the module. So this is the acceleration, and normally on Earth you'd add an extra, a number of zeros to these values because there's lots of acceleration. But nothing happens. But we really want to check the diary's all right, or when there are gaps in the diary, we'd like to understand what they're doing. Said, okay, well, acceleration's great. Why are you looking at that? Because there's no gravity. It's not going to help you. We had a look at the skin conductance. Are these guys getting hot and sweaty exercising? But didn't really tell us anything. It's quite warm up there, but everything's very firmly regulated and controlled. So we weren't really going to see that. And then we turned on, the heat flux. It's not a cure-all for anything, but maybe on the space station it's quite interesting in that big jump. We said, oh, we didn't know that. That's when they go to sleep. And oh, look, they sleep in on the weekend. And actually, we didn't know. They sleep upright. You don't lie down to sleep again. You just kind of zip yourself in the sleeping bag in whatever orientation the bag's in. And so they said we didn't have good logs of when they were sleeping. So now we can do sort of a really small market because there's only 2 or 3 people up there at a time. But we can detect when people are sleeping on the space station. And it turns out some exercising too. Okay, much more serious and much bigger market. And there's 105 people here and a dog. We have to forget the dog. And you could scale this up then, to 1,000 and 10,000 and 100,000 people. But this is the thing this is the biggest sort of nuts and bolts of handling the data that I care about. And that is that you might have lots of data about all these people, and so you do some predictive analysis. But what I want to know is that when you wear the device, and I've never seen you before, and you're not one of these, I still want to know how accurate it's going to be for you, and it's going to work for you. And it's not. I love the GNC talk about the gold card, but it's somebody returning, and you already know them, so you've got a clue about what they're about to do next because you've learned their history. You could learn you can have all the data you like from these people, but we have a device in a store that someone we don't know is going to go buy, and they're going to put it on for the first day and expect it to work. And so I'm trying to make something that can do that. And so the process and the method that we go through for that is very important for us. And then equally, we get a lot of people, the quantified self gang, who are very scientifically literate and data literate, but they're experimenting on themselves. They don't really care about their own data. And we'll mention that for a minute. I mean, here's something. They might do the top thing. This is what I think I do in my life, in my day. And this is where I think my calories come from. And now, of course, now you can monitor, now you can quantify yourself. We could measure it and say, well, actually, this is really what you do, and here's really where your calories come from. And you can make some quite informed decisions about that, like what's worth doing. Is 20 minutes of your day going to give you a really big payback in terms of exercise and exercise intensity? So that's useful to know. But I'll explain to the individual that individually we've broken you out. This is just for you, but the only way we could do it was actually by processing hundreds of thousands of other people to learn that oh, you were on a spin bike, oh no, it was a different kind of bike, and then you got on the road. That all the different kinds of exercise you did, the reason we could recognize that new piece of equipment you got on was because actually we saw a lot of other people previously get on it, and we learned how to recognize that and learned what the calorie burn was on that, or something like that. So it's personal, but it's personal because we had a big data. We did the analysis on a lot of people beforehand. Sleep is another thing that comes up a lot because it's very important to our overall health. This is something we did a couple of years ago. It's 22,000 nights of sleep. That doesn't sound like a lot. It was a lot a few years ago when we were doing it. It was I think it's 10 times bigger than any previous clinical sleep study. So that was big for them. So well, why didn't you just make it 100 times? We'll save something for the next year we'll come back and we'll just add an extra 0 to the end, and come back another year and add another 0 to the end of how many nights sleep we study. Women sleep 20 more minutes than men on average. If you're a man, nothing you can do about that. You can't flip your gender and get more sleep. So but what people do want to know is, well, how do I move to the right? How do I get more sleep? The quantified self crowd will experiment. They'll try giving up coffee for a week and keeping it, and eating a late dinner and then not eating. So you can do that, but there's so many things you have to test on yourself. You might be lucky and hit on something that helps you sleep, but by grabbing 22,000 nights or 100,000 people's sleep for a week and looking at when did they eat, what were they drinking through the day, we can take a shortcut for all that and just get to the answer for someone of your age and your gender and your weight. This is the route to improving your sleep. But someone for your age and your gender and your weight, it's a different set of things you have to do to get more sleep. Or sorry, we can't help. Right now you're stuck at the low end, but in 5 years it'll be all right because something about your behavior will change and you'll begin to improve. When I was doing that, just as an aside, I was trying a bunch of different tools on my data. Some of you might recognize this. I'm not trying to have a go at these guys. But the CTO of the company was standing behind me and said, wow, look at those great results, Jonny. I said, no, they're horrible. And because the tool maker and the guy behind me had not read How to Lie with Statistics. And it upsets me a lot that a lot of tools, either they read it and they got completely the wrong idea and they thought, oh, we can make our graphs look amazing, or they just didn't quite get the importance of being truthful with statistics. So anyway, let's get to some real points. So for us, we're looking at we want it to work with everybody, and so we have to collect a lot of data from obviously both genders, but lots of different age groups, lots of different weights, lots of different body mass indexes, and different fitness levels, so that we feel comfortable. Typically, we break it down into, we don't really do anything with children under 3 years old, but then there's children up 3 to 12, teenagers up to 18. I know 19 is a teenager too, but somehow the way teenagers move and children move is different to the way adults move. So if you're using accelerometry to collect your data, there's a very clear difference. And then people who are retired, again, have a different, older age groups. Actual use conditions and collecting data really where people do the thing they're really going to do is very important to us. It's also a requirement from the FDA, but it would be important to us even if it wasn't. Because a laboratory might always be a nice, comfortable temperature, or collecting all your data in California doesn't make any sense for somebody who's in Pittsburgh, and it might make sense today, but remember this time last year there was snow on the ground, and so we try and collect data across the country and then in a number of other countries. We try and not stay on the same latitude so that we get good seasonality. You have to collect data over a whole year. We have to get every season, so we have to understand the difference that makes. Heart rate monitors makes a huge difference. As people who anyone who trains with a heart rate monitor will remember the heart rates in the winter are very different to the heart rates in the summer. And then the success criteria can be the professional equipment you buy or the statisticians that come along, they can have completely different ideas to what success means in terms of your data and your data analysis compared to what the end user means. So there is, when you're measuring calories and exercise, there is it's not quite radioactive water, it's an isotropic water that has doubly H2O2 molecules in it that you drink. So you have a drink, that's great. Your body's full of this isotope. You go away for 10 days, do whatever the heck you want to do. Come back 10 days later, you pee in a bottle, or they take a blood draw, they see how much of this is left. You get one number. You say, oh, over the last 10 days, you burnt 22,000 calories. And it's incredibly precise. Well, what did I do in 10 days? I have no idea. But over 10 days, this is how many you burnt. It's the gold standard in calorie counting. The mask, the pictures, that's measuring your calories every breath. So every time you exhale a breath. Oh, between now and the last breath, you burnt 1.1 calories. Okay, that's great. But a customer would say, well, I went to a 40-minute spin class. I wanted to get rid of 400 calories because that's my target for today, above my normal. So the instruments might tell you what the human wants to know. We want to work at the human level, so we have to. But then when you're audited by the FDA, you have to show you work at some scientific level. So it's a balance between those things. Not something to say at a big data conference, but small random subsets of your data are just fine. Yoden tells us that back in 1961, NIST is so impressed with his work that they still publish. You can get a copy of his book from NIST because they want you to use good method. And NIST won't complain if you take a big data set and you random subsample it. The FDA won't, ISO won't. Everybody thinks that's a smart thing to do. If you have the compute power and the capability to use all your data, fabulous. Don't worry if what you have to do is something different. More data will not always solve your problem. You guys know, probably preaching to the choir here, but so many times someone will say, well, where have you got with this project, with this problem? Oh, we haven't quite solved, it's not quite there yet. We can't quite predict if this lady's going to text during the talk or not. But, and they'll say, well, no worries, sorry. It's all right, cool, love it. And they'll say, oh, well, just collect another 100 subjects, just collect another 1,000 subjects, and then you'll be there. It's not that piling on more data doesn't necessarily then give you the answer. What more data does, it gives you more confidence of what your error is, what the true error is, how far you really are from how much is there enough information in this data to tell you that your customer's going to come back and buy more of the thing, or like what you're going to do next, or use it, or get ill, or become healthy. Just use a good design. I'm not going to sell this too much. You can follow the link. We described our design and our method for modeling large data sets to predict activities, so the way people behave, what are you doing right now, and then how to predict calorie burn, but you could transfer those to other domains, I think, in AI Magazine a few years ago. And one of the biggest thing we came out of this was our sort of zero for all. Don't need to read the first thing. In God we trust, but everything else by subject cross-validation. So getting back to the 100 people on there, but you're going to go buy the device tomorrow from Best Buy or somewhere. You go on the Jawbone.com and buy a band, and is it going to work for you? And the way we can be sure about that we feel confident that it's going to work for you, and where we've never seen you, we don't have any data history for you, is the way we sort of cut and slice the data and build our models and really understand and do lots of unseen subject testing rather than any other way of doing it. For us, it's the only sensible, it's the only thing that makes us feel we can rely on the results. We had some colleagues who were quite new who joined from another company just last week who looked at some of our clinical models. And they said, oh, Jonny, we took your data and we built a much better model than you did, and it does this amazing thing. And they said, yeah, that's because you know every subject in that pool. If one of those guys comes back and sticks their legs in the reverse blood pressure cuff thing, if you've seen those things, then yes, you'll predict exactly the right number for them. But if somebody new comes in off the street, you completely missed the point, and the method's really important, because you can think your data's telling you've got great data, and now you've solved the problem, and then the new customer comes on and writes a terrible review because it doesn't work for them, and that's not what you want at all. That's all of us surrounded by all these things that are adding to. We've got our wearable now, and we're monitoring the person, or you've got your whatever you have that's pulling in the data for the thing you're interested in. But suddenly we're surrounded by all these other things, and some of them are fabulous, and everything from making data, there's lots of data to collect. I see very few models and interpretations at the human level. So lots of correlations, lots of, well, this happens and then that thing happens. But I don't see anything that's taken it a step towards the human, which we really need to get to. The Nest, I keep naming people, and I'm not trying to pick on anyone. Nest is super interesting, with a lovely presentation, a lovely conference the other day about how people love their Nest so much, and they love the interaction, and they love showing visitors to their homes. Then the first 3 months they have it, because they're always adjusting it, they use more energy in their home by having it, by turning the dial and say, look, this changes and I can change this. And they end up using more than if they hadn't changed anything. Not that I had no idea whether they'll save energy in the long run, but they definitely use more in the first 3 months of owning it just through the enjoyment of having it. Alpha Bank is super interesting in terms of how do you use observational data about someone to motivate a change in behavior. So Alpha Bank have an account that pays the highest rate of interest of any of their accounts, but you can only put money into it proportional to how active you are, how many calories you burn a day. So at the end of the day, in their app, it gives you, you burnt here, so you can move that much money into the highest interest account. So if you really want to motivate your savings and get the best, then you just have to be more active. I think that's a very interesting approach to money talks, but there's things beyond that, and of course. Sleep again, but I hope this is going to again speak to the big data thing. I hope there's 6 hours of sleep, and lots of people are trying to model that and then tell you how that's going to influence your health. If you get more of it, you'll be healthier and happier and all sorts of things, and special alarms that will wake you up at the right time and all this kind of stuff. What we would say is we see the whole day. Of course we see the whole day because we see everything. So let's understand how the whole day factors into the sleep. Let's do the activity recognition. Let's understand when people are drinking wine and coffee and alcohol. Let's understand what sleep stages are in and why and where. When were you exercising and what kind of exercise was it? Of course, let's do that using by-subject cross-validation because we want to know that we can trust the answers. And I know if a couple of you were body media customers, you might not have realized because we didn't expose very much of it. But the reason we could do the sleep and the calorie prediction so well, that under the hood we were doing the activity recognition all the time. Just because it improved the results. You can take a signal and find a correlation to calories and say, okay, that's how many calories they're burning because I see this motion signal. Or you can take the motion signal and say, that's the motion of cycling on a spin bike, different to a road bike, different to a recumbent bike. And when you're on a spin bike, this is the way you get calories. And so we found big advantage in getting to context. But then there's more context. Oh no, so now the data's, every layer, the data's getting bigger because now more people in your household are being monitored. And it turns out that it wasn't just the coffee you had and the exercise you did that affected your sleep, but it's the food and the drink and the exercise and the day that everybody else in the house had. So now your data's expanding in lots of multiple axes that are all influencing each other. So it was a very personal, I mean, I find these things are important for what I do, and the quality of the data incredibly important. Before you go, just use it, go back and really understand, does the source of each data stream mean what you think it means? How reliable is it? How can I use it? What's the error going to be in that? How is that really going to affect my result? Not just take it by, oh, this is how much coffee somebody drinks every day. I'll just believe it and go build my system. What have we got? The performance measures, again, for me at least, it's important to, when I communicate and talk to you and say, I've got a thing, I want to be really honest and say, and it works this well, and this is how much I trust it, and this is how reliable it's going to be. The science of doing it, please really think hard about the science of the information. For our field, I call that informatics. Okay, yeah, I mean, that includes the cross-validation. I say on humans, that would be a person, but if you're maybe building a self-driving car, maybe that's roads. Maybe you cross-validate by road. And you say, well, I got 100 roads, and I want the cars to drive up these, but don't you want to know how well it's going to drive on a road it's never driven on before? It's an example of transferring the method to another domain. Context and the Internet of Things is going to become more and more important for people. And really, beyond how many emails you sent and what TV shows you're watching, because those are devices that can log that information for you. But when you're not in front of the TV or on the phone, but you're doing other things, then it's still useful to understand what you're doing in a bigger picture. So there isn't a number 5. I just pulled a few things together out of the other 4 to say of what's important. It's not always big data. It's the right data analyzed the right way. And if you can analyze the right data the right way on a really large scale, that's fantastic and aim for it. But you don't have to, don't rush to that without understanding where that came from and what it is. Start with something you can really understand. For me, quality over quantity. Design random subsamples, sorry, but they're great, and it really gets you a feel for what your data is and the quality of it. And that is pretty much where I was going to end and talk to you guys. Is that all right? Hey, yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Excellent. Fascinated by the linkage of the data you're collecting with other domains. Can you talk a little bit about Jawbone and what you're doing with the data coming from the body, but data from other domains, such as weather, 40 degrees outside, motivating you to run if you're a runner and you don't do that, or pop culture. There's 5 great movies, over the holidays, this person's going to be going to the movies more. Or personal data from their Facebook or Twitter feed. if they check in somewhere,
So
and maybe that doesn't
I
align.
can
with
only
the
talk about it a little bit because I think I'm only permitted to talk about it a little bit. I'll talk about a couple of things I think that are public enough. One was just studying what happened in different football games, like different cities, and how active different cities that are playing each other on a Saturday night football game, like Pittsburgh and Cleveland or something, and then watching all the Pittsburgh users compared to the Cleveland users. So there's some notion of connecting it to sort of a shared experience, but geographically separated and with different tribes of people to understand what kind of behaviors are intercollected with watching TV and enjoying sport together. There is something about I can't remember what we do. There's something with the weather on the Jawbone blog that I can't remember. But what I do remember is there was an earthquake in San Francisco a year ago, a little bit less than a year ago. And I know the first guy in the door, everybody turns up at 10, 11 o'clock in the morning. But some guy came in at 9 o'clock in the morning because he got woken up by this thing. So he was awake, so he came to work. And he pulled up all the San Francisco map to see when everybody was waking up. And he got these lovely concentric rings of people from the epicenter of the earthquake to when these guys woke up first and these guys woke. So he said, wow. So he spent an hour doing it and everyone else came to work. He said, what are you working on? Oh, look, I got this map. Oh, that's fantastic. Call up USA Today. I can't remember quite who it was. Somebody, press. And he said, let's publish that. It's really interesting. And the U.S. Geographical Survey, who are they called, those guys? Right, Geologic Survey, phoned up and said, that's better seismic data than we have on this earthquake. So it's obviously not designed for that, and it's not strapped to the house. It's not really measuring the motion of the house, but the human body was a very sensitive instrument, and we piggybacked on that in the wake-up days. So now we have a number of requests from them to talk about different ways we can explore that. So that it's not exactly what you wanted to hear. There's obviously, the more things you can connect, the more interesting in the end insights you can give people that could make their lives more fun or interesting or healthy. So always thinking about it, and then some of these I think just came up as accidents. The football things are curious, like San Francisco plays Pittsburgh, and so we're interested to see how the people who live there behave differently. But the earthquake thing was a sort of lucky coincidence that now we try and look at that now in for more issues, more things, news, now world events. So now we do this sort of globally and look at big events that are happening in the news to understand what's waking people up and what's making people change at least their wake-sleep habits.
Thank you.
Hey, hiya.
Jonny, that was great, really, thank you. I recently did a conference in Napa, and we had a woman, I run a trade association for MEMS and Sensors. That's a MEMS and Sensors industry group. And we did a conference, and we had a woman from the company called Metadata. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're in Boston. And they use data to help with clinical trials, to help drugs get to through clinical trials and into, to use for cancer, name your disease. They use wearables. They use a competitor. I'm sorry.
It's fine.
But they use wearables when they're doing this clinical trial to help understand efficacy and how the drug is being utilized, because they're using it to understand the behavior of that person who's in the clinical trial. She had some funny stories about how some guy, he was a complete outlier, he'd put it on his dog, right? And so the dog had done 15,000 steps in one day, and he was doing this clinical trial, and they thought, that's weird. And so they went back and they realized it was on the dog. But are you doing that? Are you working?
So
are you
as Body Media, because we were a medical device company and FDA-regulated devices, so big pharma that we can't mention, but I guess you could go to the filings at the FDA and look it up, but they would use it regularly to certain drugs to do with people who had very low mobility, but they needed to move more. That was like I guess that was a favorite drug of a number of pharmaceuticals, a favorite topic. So we were used in those drug trials because we were a regulated device. Jawbone probably isn't. It's going to be used much less because it's not a regulated device, and so won't give you you can't get the performance specs, and you can't be sure that the data's at a different level in terms of someone, if you're working at the pharmaceutical level, you want to have the best shot at showing you have the best quality data. So body media definitely was in that business.
Class 2, you're talking about class 2.
We were class 2 devices,
Right.
but we were used as evidence in filings
Right.
for drugs to do for a number of things, but mainly the most common use was to do with people who, for whatever reason, often it was like breathing, so you ran out of breath too early, so you didn't move very much. And then would the drug change that? And so that would the end result be that you would move more? We also find when people ride horses, they say, well, I got 50,000 steps. I think, well, yeah, the horse has got twice as many legs as you. It was counting the horse's steps and not yours. So it was doing it. It was working just fine. But I don't think that's we're not going after that market. It's interesting because the level of certification you have to get to is so high that Jawbone's interested in a more sort of broad community than a specific
All right.
medical use.
Thank you.
Hello.
Is this on? Yes. A sophisticated data analyst can uncover insights and then disseminate them. For example, about the women sleep more than men. Let's call that the push analysis. My question is more about the pull analysis. So my question is this: among your wearers of your devices, what are the top several questions that they say they would like answers to as a result of the data generated by their usage?
I don't know if I know the answer. I can tell you some of the reasons. 90% of people came to Body Media to lose weight. So the question was, can I learn enough? Can I learn information from this to help me lose weight? And can you prove that it will do it? Is that at the right level you're asking? In that case, it was here's the evidence that the information that will give you personally can be successful, has successful outcomes, has successful clinical outcomes. But then, but then here it is, and then off you go. I mean, we're giving you all the tools and the information you need, but they're pulling it. I mean, if they leave it in their pocket and they never look at it, nothing happens. But if they pull the information out, then we have the outcomes that show, we have the proof that they can get the outcome they want.
How sophisticated would they need to be to come up with an answer to that general question?
Oh, yeah. So obviously. At Body Media, we had to do all that work. We had to do all the interpretation of the data so that we could tell you very specific, actionable things to do. Today, you need to do this. And if you don't do it on the weekend, you need to do that. You don't have time today, that's fine. But then on Saturday, go do this thing. That was the system that went through the clinical trials to show that it could get the outcome of losing 6 times as much weight as not doing it, and 3 times as much weight as if you bought a book from Barnes & Noble. I mean, lots of tests to see how does it compare to doing other things, like joining a weight loss group, buying a weight loss book, or just having your friends phone you up and tell you you're doing a good job or something. So we did lots of interpretation. Again, the Jawbone app is more about forming communities of healthy communities. So that's a different. I mean, Body Media was a medical device with a specific purpose, and the Jawbone device is a more general health and wellness device. So it's going to tell you useful things about your sleep, but it's not going to diagnose things for you and tell you specific. It could give you some specific tips, but it won't give you specifics in terms of the outcome, because it's not in that field.
Thank you.
Hello.
I wanted to ask you about what you see in terms of a shift from wearing a device on your wrist to having sensors in clothing. I don't
Sure.
understand the purpose of having sensors in clothing.
I mean, that's where I started, first to market with the Philips Levi's wearable clothing. There's some very simple things. A thing on your wrist that's hard, it's very easy to clean. So you know it's dirty or clean, and you're very happy to put it on the next day, like your wristwatch. So you don't worry about it. A thing that's clothing, you're also very aware that it's not clean. So you stick it in a hamper, and it waits there a week, and then you launder it every week. So a wearable that's in clothing, if it is the clothing, there's a lot of problematic issues of keeping that. How many do they need? Does a user need 8, 10, so that they always have a clean one? Or you're happy that they only wear it at the gym once a week? So you see a hybrid often of the cool the polar bras and another brand where the sensor's fabric, but the module pops on and off. So you can your heart rate monitor, the expensive bit of electronics, you're not going to risk putting it in the washing machine anyway, so it pops off. But you have 3 or 4 sports bras. You have a sports bra for every day you go to the gym that's clean, so that's not a problem. And so there's a combination of, it's about the convenience and the application, I guess, is the answer to that. And the convenience now that people are prepared, the level of discomfort and inconvenience I'm prepared to go to, is to have a watch on one wrist and have something else. But it's maybe harder for me to schedule that I've got the clean wearable undershirt every day that I need to wear it. But if it's all about just marathon training or something like that, then maybe you know that your gym, the mix works. The reason there's a big push, of course, is that it's a hot topic. And so the space hasn't been won by anybody for fabric wearables. And so there's lots of opportunity with different clothing companies to have a product. The jackets cost $1,000 when I made the Levi's jackets, but we sold out. But they did a lot more than the $300 jacket that didn't have the stuff in it did, of course. Burton was really the company that then took that and ran with it in that you're on the slope and you don't want to take your glove off to change your MP3 player, so they'll put the controls in fabric. Kind of makes sense in that application in that it's very cold, but you're a cool kid snowboarding and you want to listen to your music, so you want the controls where you can press them on your jacket. So in the right application, it might make lots of sense, and if for you it doesn't, that's fine, because nobody's really still quite solved the problem of where is all the technology really going to be. Okay. Using?
Thermography, the ability to use thermography.
I don't know. I'd say that I'm not. I mean, we measure lots of thermal parameters of the body. We think it's really important personally. Most products don't care. Like if you want to make a new product and get there fast, then MEMS is the way. It's going to get you a very long way very quickly. If you then want to do something that's a lot harder and sophisticated and takes you to where you want to go to, then you need to add extra sensing capabilities beyond that.
Hey,
Hi, Henderson.
Hey, Jonny. You've been doing data science forever, and with the big push for big data in the recent years, what has been the most difference in the way you work as a data scientist? What kind of tooling improved your job, or you should do the same thing you've done 5 or 10 years ago?
Yeah, I think that's, there was a point where a desktop PC was all you needed and everything was great in terms of compute power. And then it was, a desktop, but it's got 8 cores, so you can go a little bit parallel. And MATLAB will happy to charge you an extra $10,000 to let you run on more cores, so why not? To it's suddenly a completely different race happening at Amazon with the notion of a really, really distributed base for your data and a distributed way of chomping on it, which maybe you can tell from some of my talk I've been resisting a little bit in that it's useful, but it's not the answer if you don't understand what you've got. And working on smaller sets sometimes to really understand the quality of what you've got before you then go and deploy on this huge, massive cloud-based system. So the notion of parallelization, some of the steps backwards in that lots of the tools that run on parallel clouds, you can't do some of the modeling can't be done distributedly. Like you need all the data all at once to do some algorithm. And so if you've got all your data in lots of little subsets, because that's all you can handle and jump on those, so some of the calculations you just can't do like that. So some steps went back. So you see lots of correlations, you see lots of scatter plots, because they're easy to do, and you can do those on, but it's not so the sophistication level of the really big tools seems to have taken a step back. Well, this is all we're really capable of doing right now, where we work out how to do. Whereas if you were back on the on the desktop PC, you could do more sophisticated analysis because you could load in all the data at once. Obviously, we were running out of memory really fast. It's very obvious. Like some of the really popular tools of the 10 years ago, like Weka, it's a machine learning tool from New Zealand. And then it was very. I mean, only 8 years ago, we were running out of memory, and that it was crashing all the time because it couldn't handle the amount of data we were already collecting. And that was a sign that we should have read early that almost every tool we see. So we build our own tools, and so we build these big data sets, and it takes 10 minutes to load the data set. We went and we often evaluate commercial tools. The last two took 8 hours and 24 hours to load in the same data set. Obviously, you can't wait 24 hours even before we even begin working. So that's again, everybody's got to catch up with the scale. Like the scale has changed so rapidly, and I know we need to be at that rapid large scale, but I also think that work at the right scale until you know it's really right, and then you then scale up. I think we're running out of time. I think I was told that we have run out of time. So I'm here most of the day. Maura's here too. Love to talk to you about what you're up to, and if you have any questions, just come ask me. Thanks a lot.